Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to a brand new live edition of Big Hero News. Chewy, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Oh,
It's a Monday.
I'm keeping you up, am I? Is it time for sleep already?
I'm fighting off the nun-eyes. I really am. Keep me.
How are you, man?
Not too bad.
How's the life?
Life is good. My favorite part of my day today is the use of an industrial concrete cutter right outside my workplace all afternoon. It was very good.
Headache?
Just so good. I just wanted to go out there and ask the guy to put it right through my dome.
Yeah.
Just end it.
It's amazing. I mean, it's those things, like there's a lot of roadworks in Dunedin at the moment, a lot going around the place, and I was driving somewhere in the last couple of days and I just thought, oh, how long is this going to be? I went to Subway in George Street, which is opposite Knox Church for people who know the area. So in the main drag, but kind of probably 1,500 to 2 Ks away from the Octagon. And I said to the guy in there, I was like, oh, roadworks here. How long is this going for? He went, oh, we've been told it'll be there until August. And I'm like, what? Yep. And so they're going to have their everything cut up outside until August. So that's what's happening. So it'll be lovely once it's done. And I do like the areas of George Street that have been done so far. But just to think about having a business or working or having to find a park or, you know, for 10 months of upheaval, literally right outside the door, I feel for people. I
tell you what I've noticed though. So you know how they did that, the smaller block last year.
Yep.
And everybody was like complaining it's not two-way and there's not enough parking and it's all just a waste of money and why don't they put the street back how it was, all of that sort of stuff. As soon as they unveiled that block and people could see it,
yeah, everyone loves it.
It's changed. It's changed on the dial, and I find that really interesting because there's so much information out there if you went looking for it.
Yeah,
you know, there was artist renderings and all of this sort of stuff. You could tell what it was going to be like.
Yeah,
but people had preformed their opinions, and that was it.
Yes, it's always the way, isn't it? Everyone gets out and they complain, they bitch and they moan, and then when something's done, they're like, "Oh, that's quite nice, really." Hello, everyone in the chat. Hello, Gareth. Hello, V. Hello, John T. Hello, Peter. Tell you about that shortly. Hello, Emma. Hello. Sorry. Do you know the correct response to what time to fly is said, or are you too young, Joey?
Oh, Heidi, hi. I do remember that. I was very young.
So the staff says, they say, Heidi, hi, campers, and the patrons of the place say, Hody ho.
That's the one. And they had a xylophone thing. Bing, bong, bing.
Yeah. Simon there as well. Dane in there as well. Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Okay, look, we're going to start somewhere very quickly and almost as a bit of a tribute because I think it's important when people move on. So Chester Burrows, who obviously for Chewy and I, and probably for many people watching, didn't necessarily sit in the same world as us politically, but he did some things and he served his country. And he actually came on this show 8 months ago. I'm going to play you a couple of seconds of that in a minute. And just as a way to kind of, I guess, pay tribute to whether I hope we live in a world that whether you love or hate their politics, whether you agree or disagree with them, we can still acknowledge that people who do things for our country from where they're doing it from should still be acknowledged. So I just wanted to acknowledge Chester Burrows, who passed away today, diagnosed from cancer last year. In fact, he came on our show 8 months ago. He was only 65, and he represented the Whanganui Electric from 2005 until he retired in 2017. He said he was I think I remember him saying he wasn't able to do a certain day because he was going to the doctors or something, and then like I said, oh, you're okay, everything good, meaning I thought he had gone because he had a flu or something. He goes, oh yeah, I've got cancer, and I'm like, oh geez, okay, heavy. All right, and I didn't really push much deeper than that, but he told me about that, and he was a really interesting cat. Here's him with us. We look at us. We're 20 years younger, Chewy. Because funnily enough, and I thought about this today, Chewy. We haven't heard this so much recently, but there was a point in time last year where the National Party was talking about banning gang patches, and also warrantless searches. Notice all that language has gone away. Have you noticed that?
Yep.
Now think about it now. If you haven't noticed it, all that language has gone away. So Chester Burrows and Whanganui was involved with the attempt to ban some gang patches. Oh, look, same hat. Didn't even notice that. Look, see, same hat. Yeah. And he came on board to tell us a few things like about how it didn't work. And I've just got a little clip from him here. I think this is where he's about to talk about warrantless searches. We'll just play 60 seconds of it, then we'll move on. But this is a bit of a sayonara and a tribute to Chester Burrows, to him and his family.
Like you identify the children of gangs in schools and throw extra resources and activities at them. You work hard to be able to work, say, with, for instance, the women in those gangs, because they're frequently the decision makers around the household, and the young ones who are going to grow up and not join the gang are going to be young ones who have come under the influence of, a strong and powerful wahine toa in there. It's going to be their grandma, or it's going to be their mother, or something like that. And I deal with people in gangs and associated with gangs, on a very, very frequent basis. And a lot of those kids grow up and don't be part of the gang because of what they've witnessed and because they're being protective and because of the intervention of someone. So the government could work hard to make sure that they are intervened with. But the other problem is there's a hell of a lot who grow up and just get inculcated into the gang because that's all they've known.
Yeah.
And you've got to work hard to break that cycle, and it's got to be across all those.
I don't know if you just didn't at the same time, but I said it here and then I said it on there and then I heard it on. So Chester came out last year saying that the plan that National was putting out, that even though he's a former, obviously, national minister and pretty high-ranking National Party member, was saying bad idea. And I think what he said from memory, and I put it in the thing, was it's good for getting headlines, but it doesn't work. So that's what he came out. And someone's mentioned in the chat, and I was going to talk a little bit about this. No disrespect to Chester, because we're not dancing on someone's literal grave here, but it is interesting how when people kind of move away from politics, retire from politics, move on from, they, for want of a better word, kind of find a soul. And I mean, that is a bit harsh because I'm not saying you didn't have one, but you see it in America quite a lot with all those Republican governors or senators that are leaving. All of a sudden that's when they stand up against Trump, but not when they're in the actual house. And I don't know. Okay, so with Chester, I'm not commenting on that, but it was someone's mentioned it in the chat as well. It's just the policies whilst you are in government versus when you are out of government.
I mean, I can think of Jim Bolger doing an interview and railing against neoliberal policies, and then there's I think 2 or 3 former national MPs that were like, oh, I definitely changed my views on homosexual law reform and marriage equality and stuff like that. And it's like, well, why didn't you do it earlier?
when you had some ability or some power to do something with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, a farewell to Chester Burrows. We didn't know him a lot. He gave some time to us and he passed today. So we just wanted to mention it. The other thing we wanted to mention, and there's people already asking about this as well, is Thursday night. Thursday night had a night out. Well, we weren't here, but I noticed that quite a few people ended up watching what we put out there as our repeat. So we went out for a beer and a meal with Byron. I've already put this out on Twitter if you've seen it, but there you go. That's us in town having a big old feed. And that was thanks to you guys who did super chats on the Friday night that Byron was here. Now, I was reminded today, I reminded myself that actually there's a couple of you going to receive a prize for that night as well, because they'd give away some t-shirts. I haven't actually looked at that because I'm a slack ass, but I've just written it down and put it in memory. I'll start looking at that tomorrow. So yes, we had a great time. I reckon it was a good time, Chewy.
Yeah,
good chats,
obviously
good time.
lots of big, heavy topics being discussed. I think my favorite was just how batshit insane Bollywood is.
Yeah,
that was a good. We're just passing a phone around with some of the most insane Bollywood scenes we could find.
And up here, right there it is there. It's Byron's book. And what I've done this here, medium rare was the steak, by the way, Carl. What I've decided this week is anyone through the whole week, which is, I guess, Monday to Thursday, who does a super chat will go into the draw for that book, which is autographed by Byron. So if you're interested in it, that's the deal. Whether it's a 49-cent super chat or a $499 super chat, whatever it is, super chats go into the draw for Byron's book. Don't go crazy though, because if you're going to go crazy, I'd rather you just went and bought one of Byron's books to help him out as well. But you know, if you want to enter the draw for Byron's book up there, which he's signed, every super chat this week goes into the draw for a copy of Byron's book, and there will be one winner. Right. Let's also say, speaking of that, it is a huge thanks, as we always say, to our patrons. If you want to help support the work we do, you can visit us at patreon.com/Big Hero News. Another new name on the board. I'm going to have to start making a second page soon, Chewy. Welcome to the whānau Cheryl Richards, who's joined our Fuel, F-U-E-L level. $8 a month. Cheryl came on board today, actually just probably an hour before the show started. So welcome, Cheryl. And if you're interested in helping us do the work that we're doing, helping us, keep the lights on and pay the internet and pay off that 3060 graphics card we had to put in so we didn't hang up during the day, then you can become a patron by heading to patreon.com/Big Hairy News. Speaking of patreon.com, of course, we had a bit of a meetup, Chewy, on Friday morning. We had some people come along, and I've got the video of that. I haven't actually asked the people who came whether they mind the video being shown, because I might put that on. Oh, Cheryl's here. Welcome, Cheryl. I might actually put that video on the Patreon page, but I'll check with the people first. And if they don't want to be on it, what I might do is blur their square on Zoom and then put it on anyway, because it's just voices. Actually, maybe I'll just turn it into an audio file. That's what I'll do. I'll turn it into an audio file, and then I'll put, I don't know. I'll figure it out. And so others can see the us hanging out on Saturday morning if you didn't have time to be there. All right. So thanks for coming on board, patrons. Good to have you there. Comrades, patrons, friends, whānau, any other words that we want to use for that. We are going to be having a look a little bit at Three Waters tonight, mostly having a look at it because National has thrown out of their voice boxes a lot of words, but haven't actually said very much. Lots of words, but not much content. Actually, that'll be coming up in the second part of the show. But I had a read of this today. Now, I know this is sort of, not to minimize it, sort of old news a little bit. Not old news, but older news. But the thing about the Ohio train derailment story that I'm fascinated by today is the idea about, and I guess I'm relating this back to New Zealand. I'm relating this back to the National Party or to the right, liking to be small government and fewer regulations. Let me just remind us all of the situation. Here's a bit of a news clip, a news story about the derailment from last week.
We now know the train's emergency brake system kicked in after the NTSB says a critical alarm went off. Investigators say the crew was following procedure, but there are questions as to whether that procedure needs to change. The NTSB's preliminary report says that the train passed 3 different sensors that took the temperature of a suspect wheel bearing, but only that third temperature check was high enough to trigger an alarm, according to investigators. And the NTSB chair says that the railroad sets the temperature threshold at which an alarm goes off, with investigators now looking.
Just point number 1, the railroad sets that, so there's no regulation for that. So they can set it at whatever they want to. Just a little point, the railroad sets that.
Into if that threshold should be different. This report came out as Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg visited this community and visited the derailment site in East Palestine, Ohio. He had been criticized for not coming here sooner, and he is calling for increased rail safety measures. All of this unfolding as the NTSB says it plans to hold what it calls a rare investigative field hearing that is planned for this spring. Jesse Kirsch, NBC News, East Palestine.
Oh, that's such good names, eh? Jesse Courage, NBC. Anyway, so they're saying the brakes had a big part to do with this. The emergency brakes didn't fire off on time, but there is also a lot of a lot of evidence pointing towards the brake being an issue. So Pete Buttigieg turned up there. Criticism, he was too late. Of course, so far I've seen the GOP blaming woke liberals for this era, race issues for this era, Joe Biden for this era. And Donald Trump eventually went there as well. And here's a story for you that I'll from Vanity Fair. He seemed to forget the part he played in the derailment. The story says Trump forgets to mention the train. Listen to this. Trump forgets to mention the train safety regulations he gutted during a visit to East Palestine, Ohio. Got a video for you on this as well. But during a visit to East Palestine, Ohio on Wednesday, Donald Trump accused the federal government of indifference and betrayal in the wake of the February 3 freight train derailment. The resulted in residents within 1 mile radius being forced to evacuate. He added that, quote, "What this community needs are now not excuses, but answers and results." And throwing out a bit of red meat to the right, he said he, quote, "sincerely hopes that Joe Biden will have some money left over to deal with the disaster when he gets back from touring Ukraine." One thing Trump didn't mention, the train safety regulations he gleefully gutted as president. Now, Fox News, this is a fantastic segment from Fox News because they spend the first several, it's not minutes, but moments, finding every excuse under the sun to blame the Democrats for the derailment. And then this guy here, Steve Doocy, I don't know whether there's a concerted effort to put forward DeSantis, or he, as we sometimes see, said the quiet part out loud accidentally, but he lays out on the table how Obama had put these regulations in place around brakes on trains, and then Trump was lobbied by the train industry and he took them all out. And then within a couple of years, there's a massive accident with a train that likely could have, I don't know, we know this for 100%, but likely could have had an updated braking system that may not have. And so Trump did that. Let's have a little bit of a listen. First of all, it's kind of hilarious because the first half of that's all they're doing is blaming the Democrats. And then Doocy purposely just drops the hammer and goes, but remember, you'll enjoy it. I'm sure it's almost laugh out loud. You'll enjoy it. Where's my mouse gone, Shelby? Oh, there it is.
The Gutless Norfolk Southern Group said, we know that many are rightfully angry and frustrated, but unfortunately, after consulting with community leaders, we have become increasingly concerned about the growing physical threat to our employees and members of the community. So they did not show up. So basically, it was a venting session with nothing being done. Congressman Bill Johnson, who's a Republican, an Air Force officer, for some reason, seems kind of mellow. Because
an Air Force officer
says, you know, we got a seat for your people who just, that's not going to get things done. You got to start rattling some cages to get some attention down there, because the Biden administration does a great job of not addressing any issue that really affects Americans. Is also looking the other way here.
Yep.
You cannot allow them to do that. They have to be battered in order to speak about China, and now they're ignoring this. I'm also asking what's going on with the whole train system. You got derailments happening at a dizzying rate. Does this have anything to do with the strike and the brokering of the strike that
the workers
against these workers? So for them
strike
not to show
from the
up
workers
last night, these guys got to lawyer up at the same time. They got to live their lives. For the most part, the way this city profiles, this is a working class area where we live paycheck to paycheck. They don't have money to go stay in a Four Seasons.
Plus, they go there to get answers, and the company doesn't show up, Norfolk Southern, because they're scared. They said that they're worried about their
Steve
safety.
Doocy's about to give an
the
answer.
People are asking questions. They're screaming out questions. If you watch the full video when they're sitting here in the high school.
How did this happen?
Or gymnasium.
Who's responsible?
And, Bill Johnson, the congressman, he said, look, the White House is not here. If you have a question, then
White House's fault.
Here's
should
my
be here.
card. Send it to me, and all the questions will be answered. I will contact the White House.
Right. Speaking of the White House, apparently regulations regarding train safety were changed during the Trump administration. This particular railroad and others lobbied President Trump to dismantle an Obama-era rule that would have required railroads to update their braking systems. And apparently the Obama administration had pushed for it to govern transportation of hazardous materials after about 500,000 barrels of crude were dumped. But ultimately, the Trump administration undid that and said the costs exceeded the benefits. Nobody understands. And, you know,
And then even he pivots back to other stuff as well. But I just thought, I'm not gleefully laughing at the situation there, but it's almost a Saturday Night Live skit. It's almost a parody of itself. You know, Democrats, Biden, they probably threw AOC's name in there somewhere as well. The workers shouldn't be striking, you know, so it's bad workers. And then at the very end, now, you know, that whole kind of thing, how we needed a safer train. You know how Trump stopped that? It's almost a parody. It's hilarious.
John Oliver last week tonight did an excellent piece on this. The braking system that a lot of American trains use is the design is 150 years old.
Well, that's what Obama was trying to fix.
Like,
and well,
literally 150 years old. And I think rather than all the brakes coming on at once, they come in carriage by carriage by carriage. So it's not enough braking force, and you burn out the brakes at the start. Someone in the chat asked, how long was that fucking train? I'll tell. Well, I don't want to tell you how long it is, but it was, I think, 18,000 ton.
Wow.
Or 8,000 ton or something like that. It was an enormous train. And basically they were fudging the numbers on how many of those carriages were dangerous goods as well. So technically, because they had put so many carriages that weren't dangerous goods, the entire train was classified as non-hazardous.
Yes.
To get around regulations. We've got Peter in the chat mentions, you know, most workers in US railroads have no sick days. One union man said he'd been awarded 4 days a year. And then you've got all of the problems that they have in the States with their massive underfunding, under-maintained infrastructure. Their bridges are broken, their rails are bent, their roads are falling apart. The citizens are taxed to the eyeballs from federal and state level, and they're not getting hospitals, they're not getting roads, they're not getting bridges or railways. But Jesus Christ, have they got a good fleet of aircraft carriers.
Yep, and lots of bullets for them, their guns. Now, this is the thing I wanted to spin slightly to New Zealand, because I'm firmly a believer, and I've said this many times before, and I've said this to many people on the right when they start to scream about smaller government. The idea of bigger government or smaller government, right? Either perspective is horseshit. What we need is better government. And sometimes bigger government, and the example I've gone to in the past, maybe we can start talking about this derailing. Sometimes bigger government means more inspectors on oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico. So therefore, that was an issue where bigger government was needed. More people, government, were needed to inspect that oil rig from BP to help it potentially not, or at least see the problems that were going on there. Sometimes smaller government might be the right answer, but sometimes some places are overinflated. However, this is what the right does. This was Donald Trump while he was president, making a pledge to have no justification as to what were going to be, just less regulation. No matter what it was, just less, right? And because as far as these people are concerned, and I hearkening back to our upcoming election, because you'll be hearing this from the right, is as long as there's less regulation, it's better. You mean, like, if those regulations were around, you know, how to build a house and how to have a secure wall, I would say no, let's not get rid of those ones. But they never tell us what they're getting rid of. They just say less is better, smaller is better. Have a look at this.
So together, let's cut the red tape. Let's set free our dreams. And yes, let's make America great again. And one of the ways we're going to do that is by getting rid of a lot of unnecessary regulation. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Never tells us what it is, right? And then he does a little kind of primary school panto. For people who are listening, he's standing in front of two massive stacks of paper. One stack.
I'm just going to say, man, I don't think this Trump guy's. I don't think he's a good dude.
So what he's doing, for people who are listening to the audio podcast, is on his left there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 20 stacks of paper that are over 6 feet tall, And he's saying that's how many regulations, that's all they tell us, that there are in New Zealand today. And then to the right of him, there's like, I don't know, it's below his knee level. So let's say it's 2 foot of 3 piles of 2 foot of paper. And he says that was 1969. And my pledge to you is we're going to get back to fewer regulations than 1969. Doesn't tell you what they are, doesn't tell you what they're going to be, doesn't tell you, what they just, this is the right-wing trope that less is better for some
In
reason.
1969, you didn't have any or nearly no safety equipment in cars. You had lead paint. You had doctors smoking during operations. Maybe that's not something to aim for.
Yeah. So I guess I'll say it again, right? That's an American situation, an American issue, but the ideas, the principles you will see on the right in any Western country. For some reason, and it's never been articulated to me, and I've asked people, we had the Taxpayers Union on last year, and I said this exact point to them, and they went, okay, fair enough. He goes, but then at the interview, it was like, but usually smaller is better. It's like they no justification, just smaller is better. Like, let me put it this way. Sometimes I think about the economy being like a household budget, right? So let's think about services from a government being like your doctor's surgery. Would you rather there was enough doctors to see everybody at your local doctor's surgery in time, no one having to wait or queue? Or would you rather that there not be 6 doctors there, but there be 1 and 1 receptionist rather than 5 or 6? Because that's smaller. So surely that must be better. It doesn't work that way. So sometimes smaller is better because it can be more efficient. Sometimes you need to increase the numbers of some areas. And I just don't want to ever play this tropey game of bigger is better. Ironically, smaller is better. You never hear the left saying bigger is better. You only hear the right saying smaller is better, because I don't think anyone on the left believes bigger is better. I think even though I don't hear many people articulate this, I think what we think, and I do articulate this, and I believe most people would agree with this and probably think this even if they haven't articulated it, is better. Whether it's bigger or smaller. If it's better, that's what's better.
There was a lot of conversation a few months back about the massive increase in people working for the Ministry of Health and that sort of thing. And it's like, well, yeah, but would that make sense? We're in the middle of a pandemic. But yeah, there's this huge amount of people working there. Cool. Are they doing good work? Or do we have a whole bunch of people going in there to eat their lunch? We're not talking about fucking gliding on and how things were in the 80s. And I just think there's that perception. People think back to the way that the post office was, or the railways were, that you're just like, well, we want zero unemployment, so we'll just put everybody in the railroads and job done. But hey, maybe that's a better option than having a whole lot of unemployed.
Yeah. And look, maybe there are some things like, I'm sure all of us, I've never owned a swimming pool, but I've heard stories about people who own swimming pools and they've had to get a certain fence, and then a council has changed the regulations of what a fence needs to be, and then it's cost them another $10,000. I get that can be frustrating and bureaucratical, but I'll come back to the idea that smaller doesn't equal better. If you can identify what regulations are going to go and why, I'll have that conversation with you. But the idea of going from whatever that was, 6 feet times 15 of pages of paper to 2 feet times 6 of piles, just to say that's better because it's smaller. It's what it is unintelligent bullshit. And I'm not going to fall for it. And I hope other people don't, because my question will be to you, if you say smaller is better, I'll go, what are you cutting and why, and what is the flow on? That's what I'd like to know.
I remember the sloganeering around it, and it was like, for every new regulation, we're going to get rid of 2 old ones.
Yeah.
And it was like, yeah, cool. That's a nice pithy soundbite, but it's not a policy to run a country on.
Yeah.
How do you pick which regulations are going?
Yeah.
Oh, well, you're introducing this legislation that says that babies can't have rattles made out of lead. Well, we're going to get rid of that one so we can get this new one in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very weird.
Yeah. All right. Anything in the text we want to put up before we move on to Three Waters?
A couple of people talking about the railways over there. That train was 151 carriages.
Really? That seems like a lot.
Ohio is flat as a pancake. So generally speaking, if you want to, well, if you want to maintain everything and not have brakes from 150 years ago, it should be the perfect place to run a long freight train like that.
But I just think about if I'm standing at the train crossing, am I there for 12 minutes while it goes past?
You are.
Okay, fair enough.
And you can't go around because it's 151 carriages.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, those people in East Palestine, like, they're like, everybody get out. It's a toxic cloud. You can't breathe it. And then they're like, 3 days later, come back. Ignore the dead fish in the streams. And people are literally like, yeah, I know I'm sick from the chemicals in the air, but nobody's telling me what to do. And I've got to go back to work and I've got to go back to my house. And I can't go anywhere else. They're just going back in there.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It is crazy, crazy, crazy. And Ohio's a big red state. So, you know, they will turn around and they'll blame whoever's in the presidency at the moment. They won't. They probably won't see that analysis of like, well, actually, your guy did this, or came. It was a big contributing factor of it. They won't see it.
Well, when you've got the guys on Fox News saying it, I mean, what will happen though is I found that, I think it was on Media Matters page. I knew I'd seen the clip on another show and I found it. I highly doubt that'll be highlighted on the Fox News website. So that's probably gone into the doldrums of it was a live broadcast and it won't be seen again, but some people have got it and it's out there, which means the Fox News audience probably won't see it. But, you know, it's a little bit like, you know, when people are like, oh, you know, thousands of people are believing X, Y, Z, and they're like, but is that because you've sown the seeds for them to believe X, Y, Z? You know, it's like, look at this terrible thing that's happened and there should be, you know, better safety. Hang on, you're the guy who cancelled the legislation around making brakes safer, and one of the issues for this thing seems to be the brakes failed. Yeah, you don't get to play both sides of that. Sorry, mate.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else, or should we jump into Three Waters?
No, Three Waters. I'm ready for it. Because
I thought a bit of light-hearted banter tonight around Three Waters. So Q&A in the weekend. Yeah, we've got a couple of stories from Q&A. One is the minister, or he's not the minister, but the National Party MP, Simon Watts, who was speaking on behalf of National over this. And then we've got a couple of mayors talking about it as well, all from the Q&A program. So, because National's come out and they've called it their local water done well policy, whatever. And the first part of this conversation is actually just talking about what is the plan? What is this local water done well plan? Can you please explain it to us? And I have to say, Jessica's hair is on point. That's just a personal opinion, but we'll move on from that. Here we go.
Absolutely. So we've announced our local water done well policy yesterday. 4 key components of that. One, to firstly repeal the Three Waters legislation that's on the table, get rid and scrap the mandated co-governed entities. Restore council ownership and control, a key
local
element
ownership
and key point of difference, what the sector has been calling for. Thirdly, really ensure that we've got strict water quality regulations. Also importantly, strict investment regulations, which will ensure that money going in and collected for water rates actually goes into water infrastructure.
Okay, this is really important. And no one's picked up on this yet. And Jessica didn't pick up on this. So let me paint you a picture, baby birds. I'll feed you. Because National has spent the whole year, right, the last 12 months, talking about this controlling Labour government and them trying to mandate and order what local councils are doing. Remember, that's been a massive criticism. I'll play this bit back again because I think we might have been talking about it. Just have a listen to one of these points. It's called water investment.
Strict investment regulations.
Hang on.
Welcome back. You're watching AM 12 after 8. The Prime
It's all gone wrong.
For years and years.
All right,
and entities need to be financially sustainable.
Sorry.
Infrastructure and regulations really ensure that we've restore council ownership and control.
Right. I'm sorry about that.
Element and key
so it's the next one, I think.
What the sector has been calling for.
Water quality, and
Thirdly,
it's the one after that.
Really ensure that we've got strict water quality regulations.
So the next one, listen to the next one.
Importantly, strict investment regulations.
Investment
which
regulations.
will ensure that money going in and collected for water rates actually goes into water infrastructure. And lastly,
okay, really important, because that's a potential government telling the council what they have to do with that water. You got that? That's the government. Imagine that they win. They're the government. They get to make this policy.
The government. That's the government. Stopping on the little guy.
No, they are mandating that any money taken in for water must be spent on water infrastructure. So they're telling councils what they have to do. This is the party that for the last 12 months has been rallying, and this is not the only example of this. Trust me, there are more examples of this as we go through. But this is the party that for the past 12 months have been talking about how dare they mandate to council what they have to do, you know, how dare they try and control it. And this is the first example of them saying that money that you take in council, we are saying you have to do these things with it. It's actually the same criticism. It might be a different topic that they've been lumbering at the Labour Party for the last 12 months. I'll play a bit more of this.
And I think the major point of difference is around ensuring that those planned for water services are financially sustainable, because the challenge has been that money has been collected across the country in areas, but hasn't necessarily gone back into that investment. These entities need to be financially sustainable, and we've got mechanisms that will allow them to do that.
We've got mechanisms to make them spend the money on that thing. So I actually don't mind that as a policy, but what I do mind is inconsistency. What I do mind is this national party saying when we're government, that terrible Labour government told the councils what to do. Oh yeah, we're going to tell them what to do, but that was bad when Labour did it, but we're going to tell them what to do. Shall we, any thoughts?
I like the bullet points. Like I can get rid of one of those bullet points. He can just sit here going, a new policy is get rid of the other guy's policy. No Māori, no money. There you go. It's wishy thinking. It's like, well, Gore's going to fix their pipes with spells from Hogwarts. They might as well go out and say that. It makes no sense.
Well, it's going to continue on because Jessica's next question to him was around the costs. What are the costs? And listen very carefully, because she asks the question, and then to her credit, after 60 seconds with him not answering it, she asks the question again, word for word. And I love it when reporters do this when people don't answer. So this is asking about the costs of this and if it's going to be, you know, how's it going to be better than Labour?
What will your plan do to the cost of water bills and to rates?
We're very clear on this, that our policy position will be cheaper than Labour's mega entity bureaucratic model, which also has complex co-governance. And I think a conga line of consultants and bureaucrats that are lining up in behind
bureaucrats.
We acknowledge that, you know, pipes and investment in infrastructure is going to need to occur. Our view is that actually putting the power with local communities is going to be a cheaper mechanism. Labour need to articulate clearly how they're going to build all these new pipes and culverts without anyone paying for it.
Here it comes.
And we've been very clear that actually we're going to provide access to long-term funding and financing mechanisms to match those long-term assets.
Great. So what will your plan do to the cost of water bills and
word for word?
So our view is that it's definitely going to, under our model, rates are not going to increase.
Really important.
Are not going to increase in comparison to Labour's 3.
Okay. Rates are not going to increase. Well, but the thing is that's a government, will they be government telling councils you cannot increase your rates? Because he says their plan is rates are not going to increase. How does the central government say to Dunedin City Council or to Waimakariri or to Hutt Valley or to Auckland, how does the government say you're not allowed to increase your rates? He's just made the claim that with their 3 waters, rates will not increase. That sounds like a bottom line to me. That sounds quite controlling of local body government.
And that definitely sounds like if you vote for that and then your rates go up and you go, hey man, you promised me, I'm furious because my rates have gone up. And they're like, well, we're the government now and you can't do anything about it for 3 years. So
there's the first 2 things where this party who have been criticizing the other party for mandating things over local body council have mandated 2 things so far. Yeah. They've mandated that money's going to be spent where they tell the council to be spent and that rates aren't going to go up. So there's at least 2 so far. We'll play some more of this.
Waters model and the status quo. And that is because we're going to be ensuring that these councils have financially sustainable plans and they have access to long-term debt funding. One of the major issues to date is that the borrowing for water infrastructure has been done on a short-term basis. We need to spread that long-term borrowing to match long-term assets. These are assets that last 30, 40, 50, in some cases longer periods.
Great.
So borrowing. Now, let's just be clear here, guys, right? If I say to you, Chewy, if I say, oh, the house you want to buy, it's 500K, but you don't have to pay anything. Your outgoings aren't going to go up because we're going to get the money from the bank.
Mm.
And then you're going to have your asset. Hang on. How does the bank get the money back? Oh, Chewy, you'll be paying for it. Yeah, you'll be paying for it, but there'll be no money. It's like, so when you borrow, to get assets, whatever they are, be it personal house or be it pipes under the ground, that then has to be paid. If it's an asset owned by a council, who pays for that? I believe that would be the ratepayers. So therefore, are they going to try and shuffle this by saying rates haven't gone up, but by the way, there's a new additional fee at the bottom for $350 a year, which is interest on the debt that your council now has. Now, again, I'm not saying this to defend Labor's plan, because Labor's plan had to be paid for as well. Fine, no question there. But what I'm saying is they're making claims that seem to be quite contrary to the criticisms they had of Labor. And there seems to be quite a bit of grey area between what they think is like paying for and paying more, in my opinion, Chewy.
This is the party of financial nous, because Labor doesn't get numbers, right? And this is the most bullshit thing I've ever heard. It's like, so all of those things that you don't like, they're not going to happen. And all the worst case scenarios that you're afraid of, also not going to happen. There's literally no downsides to this, guys. Just trust me. Who is this guy? I feel like he's the goat that they pull up on Jurassic Park to lure the Tyrannosaur out. Like, it's not good, my dude.
Remember as well, this is the party, as is their bride to be act, who are saying you're lumbering the future with debt, Labor. Why are you lumbering our children with borrowing all this money to keep those businesses alive? Why would you do that? Why would you borrow so much money and lumber my grandchildren to pay for it? It's like, well, hang on.
Your grandchildren like clean water.
But again, I don't have a problem with the concept. I have a problem that Labor is this is the same sort of thing Labor's been doing or thinking about or talking about that National's been criticizing them for. That's my problem. To be clear, I don't have a problem with the idea of borrowing. Right? I don't have a problem with the idea of borrowing to fix up the infrastructure and paying for it. I do have a problem with National saying bad. Hey, by the way, we're kind of doing the same thing. In fact, ours might even be a bit more bro-y and a bit more sort of mandatey, but you're bad. That's where my problem is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of Chewy, let's have a look at another small thing about small bureaucracy, right? Less bureaucracy we want. Let's have a listen to this next commentary, which is talking about an investment regulator. What they're going to do is they're going to have an investment regulator.
And I think that is fair, because when you talk with ratepayers, there's real concerns around the fact that actually their revenue and their rates money going in to pay for these water assets hasn't necessarily occurred. Sometimes we've seen councils using that revenue to fund other nice to have things versus the actual water.
So we're going to tell them where they have to spend their money.
The investment regulator in place. And that is really an important aspect in terms of making sure that we've got the right belts and braces around the overall model to make sure that these councils are investing in water infrastructures. They're ring fencing the revenue that they receive, and it has to go back into water infrastructure.
We mandate it.
Making sure that they've got revenue sufficiency, which means that these entities can stand on their own 2 feet. And they also need to be able to deal with growth, right? So a number of our councils are growing, and we need to be able to make sure that water infrastructure is not a blocker of more housing in this country, which it has been in some parts.
Now, I don't know what your definition, Chewy, is of, I didn't bring up the footage there, did I? Sorry about that. But your definition of bureaucracy is, but if they're creating a whole new department of investment regulator around this, that sounds like bureaucracy to me.
That
really sounds like
another layer up something.
Another layer of bureaucracy. I like it when my camera asses out like that. It looks like I'm sitting in some kind of cave. It sounds like another layer of bureaucracy to me. And I'm just not sure that the National Party of 2022 will put up with this, because it's kind of like having a czar. You know what the Republicans think of czars in America? It's a bit the samey. I apologize about my camera if you're watching. I don't know what's going on, but it's giving me grief tonight.
It's just so weird. Like, I mean, they must have known, like with the floods in Auckland and that sort of thing, the chat about Three Waters just absolutely spiked. And they go, oh, well, we've got to get some wins on the board, and here's something that's quite pertinent. And they've just shat out this policy that is getting absolutely torn to shreds, makes no sense at all. Like, this is what they've had cooking for, like, as long as Labour has been talking about Three Waters.
Yeah.
I'm sure National has been trying to come up with something, and their utter failure to come up with something better that accomplishes anything, I think speaks worlds about where they're at.
Let's play this last bit, because this is talking about, I'm probably not going to adjust my camera actually, because it's playing up tonight and it's just going to go in and out and in and out and in and out. And I don't know, it must be a battery issue. I apologize. So what am I going to look like? Let me just see how rubbish my thing now looks. Oh, look at that. You can see everything, including my vodka sitting in front of me, because I can't zoom in. I should move my vodka. I think I've got an alcohol issue problem. Okay, so what we're going to do is play this last bit as well, and then we're going to get into what the mayors have to think about this. So this is this is kind of hilarious. I'll just play it for you, then we'll look at it at the end. This is talking about how local communities, based on their response to the floods, makes them better at decision making around Three Waters. I'm not joking.
Oh, okay.
I'm not joking.
Okay.
He actually says we've just had demonstrated to us how resilient and good the local groups are. If I turn my camera off, Chewy, just tell me if my mic cuts off. I am going to just turn it off, because what's the point? If my mic stays on, I'll just leave it off for a while until I get the battery back. Hang on, I'm just turning my camera off. Tell me if I stay with you. I can still. All right, I'm just going to leave that off for a while, because if I can give some battery power to it, we'll see what happens. It's actually plugged in, so maybe the cable's loose or something. All right, so I'm going to stay like that for a while. So he actually says, because we've now got the evidence at how good the local community can organize itself based on the floods, that means, I'm paraphrasing, that means they're the right people to make decisions around Three Waters. I shit you not, that is the summation of what he's about to say.
As we've seen with the delivery of the cyclones and the way in which local communities have responded and actually dealt with the challenges locally, central government in many cases has been too slow to respond. And so what we've seen in the last 3 weeks, I think, reinforces and evidences that local communities are best placed to deal with these local assets. We need to put the right measures in terms.
So did you get that? Because of how local communities dealt with the floods, that means that is now the evidence we need to say they're best to deal with the local assets, because local communities came together in a 1 in 100-year flood, or whatever it was, a civil emergency, because they came together under a civil emergency. That means National thinks, or at least National's saying, that they're the best people to look after assets, because there is a definite connection, Chewy, between flooding waters and fresh water to your pipes, perhaps, or something like that. We'll just finish this off. I think this has got about 30 seconds to go.
In terms of regulation around them, that they deliver water quality that is at appropriate, safe standard, investment regulation around making sure that money coming in goes onto those water infrastructures, and their plans are financially sustainable, because financial sustainability is a key difference between the status quo and Labour's Three Waters model. That is the key aspect that will ensure that what these councils do today is going to last for the next 30 years.
There you go. And that's where we're pausing it, Chewy. I'm going to have a play with something, but I'm going to listen to you while you give us some very beautiful analysis of what you've just heard.
Look, I'm going to start with some of the things in the chat, because you guys were roasting this dude like so hard. I think it needs to be put out there. Cyrus NZ said, when you order John Key from Wish. John T looks like John Key wearing a look sharp John Key mask. And yeah, what John T said before, never heard of this guy before, but he gets trotted out to be the face of this pile of turds.
Yep, that's about it.
Yeah, it's just like, we get back to talking about getting rid of bureaucracy and all of that sort of thing, right? Can we just focus on the fact that having every single council in the country run its own little water kingdoms with its own replication of positions and decision-making processes and the variation within that, that is also bureaucracy.
Yes.
Like,
we're not finished with examples of bureaucracy, trust me.
No, it's like there is benefits in an economy of scale. I can understand people's fear of a massive, unresponsive single entity. But I think that I think the way that potentially Three Waters is organized avoids that, personally.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is National's big thing is like, well, it's basically the same, but somehow through the power of magic, it is going to be a better system.
Now, I have to let you know that I can't turn off the stripy screen, because the stripy screen, it sounds weird, but the stripy screen is attached to my mic. And if I go off here with that, you won't hear me. So I'm going to be up here and I'm going to do my camera. I've got a camera there and a camera there. So we'll just say good day and be like this, and I'll be a bit side on. That'll do for now. Right. So, yes. So anything else in the chat we want to get out there? Anything we want to mention on top of that? So basically what they've said, right, is they've said, we are going to mandate how you spend your money, where you spend your money. We are going to borrow, and we are going to mandate that you do not, councils, raise your rates at all. So that's what they've said. And remember, this is the party who's been yelling at the government for all these controls they've said they've been having over local councils. That's the first thing. I think now what we're going to do is we're going to go into the mayoralty conversation. I need to get my notes for this.
Can we all just also cover off here why this guy is being the mouthpiece for National's water? He must have some experience in like civil engineering or something, right? Some relevant experience with local water.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. No, during the global financial crisis, he was working for the Royal Bank of Scotland in London.
Makes sense.
He is a chartered accountant.
Right.
And later Deputy Chief Financial Officer of the Waitemata District Health Board.
Right.
He's
a small businessman. Is that what they're saying?
He's also a frontline ambulance officer for St. John. So
nice.
Lots of really relevant stuff.
Yeah.
Relevant stuff. Because the National Party is a party of people that have done things.
Yep. All right. So pretty much after they happened on Q&A, they moved over to a couple of meals. There's Campbell Barry, who's from the Wellington region, and he's actually part of Labor's working group, and he's a part of kind of talking about why Three Waters should be happening. And then there's a guy called Dan Gordon, who's from Rangiora, Waimakariri, North Canterbury. And he was a part of the group that did that Community for Local Democracies, the group that said no to Three Waters. So we're going to start with, this is Campbell. This is the Wellington guy. You can tell because he's wearing a tie and the other guy's not. That's how you know the difference. And he was basically commenting now. So this is the guy. Now remember, for fairness, he's the guy who's been working with Labor on what he thinks that they should be doing with Three Waters. He's part of their working group. And this is his commentary on what we've just heard National offer.
I've got to say I was confused once I read the National Party policy. There was a lot of rhetoric around the need to move away from the status quo, that it's not an option. But in essence, what's been put forward is the status quo with a couple of big sticks for the government to be able to use, which I find disappointing.
So do you feel like it is more tweaks rather than comprehensive changes, Campbell?
There's nothing in what the National Party have put forward that councils couldn't have done 10, 20 years ago in forming council-controlled organisations.
This is a really important part of this as well. National is saying we're going to give this back to the councils. The reason the infrastructure is fucked is because councils have fucked it up for 100 years. And National's now saying, yeah, but the best people to do it is the council. So I guess one of the questions that needs to be answered is, if the councils are the best people to look after this, why have they not done it for the past 20, 30, 40, 50 years? And Campbell Barry's going to keep coming back to this.
In the Wellington region, we've actually done that. We know the limitations of it. Yes, there are some benefits, but still there is a tsunami of cost on the way when it comes to the investment needed in water infrastructure in this country. And unless you change or you address the funding issue, then that will mean massive rates bill increases or water bill increases for our residents. So that is the fundamental issue that hasn't been addressed.
Now, what I'm going to do now, Chewy, I told you I had something to share with you. I'm going to play you the question, but not the answer to the next mayor, right? And I'll tell you why I'm going to play it. So here's the next question that comes out to Waimakariri Mayor Dan Gordon, who was against Three Waters and against government involvement in Three Waters.
Dan, I want to put this to you. Your council aside, Waimakariri has made significant investment in infrastructure, but councils on the whole haven't done a great job of controlling these water assets. Why should they get that control?
Okay, I don't care about the answer to that question just yet, because what Jessica Much has just said is your council aside, right? In other words, you guys have invested quite a bit of money in your infrastructure. You are doing quite well. Here's the thing no one's talking about. Rangiora, Waimakariri, has had a huge amount of government money interjected into it in the last 10 years because of a little thing called a 7.2 earthquake. So that whole region's infrastructure was fucked. This is a page, if you're watching, about some of the infrastructure they were doing, right? And if you see down here, funnily enough, wastewater, stormwater, sewage. So the government has already gone into Waimakariri and fixed their fucking Three Waters. And so the reason that they've had a huge amount of money driven into it, you've looked after it, says Jessica Much, is because they've had a huge amount of money given to their region because of an earthquake. And now that they've had the investment, they're pulling up the ladder saying other people shouldn't have it. So yes, their infrastructure is probably quite good. Why is it quite good? Well, because there was an earthquake. Where did you get your money from to fix up your infrastructure? Central government. Who paid for it? All of us. Chewy.
Yeah, I actually had a mate that worked for Waimakariri Council, and he basically said the same thing. You know, that there was a strong feeling in council that they'd personally done a good job, but that it was all funded from central government as part of the earthquake public.
So unfortunately, Jessa, I mean, I spoke to Dan this afternoon. He couldn't come on tonight. He might still come on tomorrow. I'll ask him these questions. But they've had a huge investment, thanks to us, in their Three Waters because of the earthquake. If they had to pay for it themselves, which they haven't had to, it would be a very different story. So he has now the privilege of sitting on his high horse, probably won't come on tomorrow, because he's just had maybe not him personally, but his forebears had a shit ton of government money borrowed that all of us are paying for to fix up his Three Waters. And I'm disappointed that didn't come up in this conversation, but it didn't. So we go on to the conversation and he talks a little bit about his numbers. Let's have a look at what they've got to say, because we're going to talk more about this as well.
In the case of our council, the numbers just simply don't add up. We've got $300 million of investment that we have identified over the next 30 years. The case put forward by the government says we're $1 billion short. The numbers are just shonky and don't add up.
So they say their numbers at 300 million. The government says 1.3 billion, right? And apparently numbers are shonky, whatever that means. But that's the disparity. We'll keep going.
And what we're saying is actually just return this decision back to local councils so we can work together on a solution. What we ideally want to see is consensus. And I've been encouraged by the message by the Prime Minister that they're going to take a fresh look. Our door is open for that discussion because we want to end this division in the country that's existing on this and see if we can find a way that we can all get reform that works for all of us. It's really clear New Zealanders do not support this. The most recent poll, 7 out of 10 New Zealanders say that they do not support this reform.
Now, let's remember what we said earlier, and I knew this was coming, so I set it up. the numbers and the stats. 7 out of 10 New Zealanders might say that, but 7 out of 10 New Zealanders are saying that based on places like Groundswell, based on places like Communities for Local Democracies, muddying the waters. If one wanted to argue, right, the mayor right here got 16,500 votes. There's 70,000 people in his region. One could argue that 76% of his region didn't vote for him, but he's the mayor. So you can do anything you want with numbers, depending on how you want to twist and how you want to word them. So let's use his numbers, right? $300 million. That's what he says it's going to cost to upgrade over the next 30 years. So that's 10 million a year. There's 28,000 rate paying properties in Waimakariri. That means each of those properties for the next 10 years has an additional $350 a year to pay. But remember, the future national government has mandated rates will not go up. But $10 million a year in Waimakariri, which is his numbers, is an extra $350 per rate paying property. So therefore, if you own 3 properties, it's $1,000 extra a year. Now, on average. Now, if the future government's mandated rates aren't going up, where is the money coming from? Well, it's coming from borrowing. So now that means each ratepayer has a debt burden put on them of $350 a year plus interest. So how does that work out? Chewy.
I think my favorite part of his pushback there is bringing up the fact that it's all about division. Because Three Waters is about dividing the people, which tells me more about his personal politics than anything else. It's like a fucking nail going right through my forehead. So basically, it's anti-co-governance. Yep. It's let's be scared of the one board position that Māori are given. It doesn't change the way that it's being voted on. It doesn't change. Like it's just ignorance. Like, I know we can dial into the numbers and that sort of thing, but this is exactly what we've been talking the whole time through, is that it's not just the numbers, there's the culture war aspect of it as well. And I'm just furious that we are going to have water full of giardia and beaches covered in poo because we thought the Māori were coming to take our water away from us.
Yep.
At this point, even if that was true, at this point, I would welcome it because we've done an absolute shit job of looking after our water in this country. A shit job.
And this is the thing, and I said it earlier, I don't have any problems with the concept of borrowing for this. I don't have any problems with all those ideas. What I have problems with is the bullshit. Hang on. Because you can smell it. It's fairly palpable, that bullshit. You can smell it. Because rates can't not go up. Whether it's because you're servicing debt and it's called something else, or whether it's because it's added to your rates bill for the next 10 years, well, put it this way. Rates may not go up, but the money going out of ratepayers' pockets to the council will go up. Whatever you want to call it, if you want to get past this by calling it a service fee or an interest fee, it's going to go up. And so I can't abide the bullshit. I don't care if you're a lefty or a righty or a centrist. I can't abide the bullshit. I can't abide the hypocrisy. And this is a hypocrisy to its absolute nth degree, because the National Party, would-be government, is saying all the things that they're going to do, which are all the things they're criticizing Labour for doing. And really, as you've identified, Chewy, the only difference is, no, we're not going to have any of those bloody Maoris on the board. That's about the biggest thing. And that's what it really comes down to. We've been saying this the whole time. This is an idea that the reason that some people think that this is racist rhetoric around Three Waters is because really the only complaint is Māori on the boards. Unelected Māori on the boards. Like there is in many sectors of government. There are unelected people making decisions. But whether you agree or disagree with that, let's not even get into that. That's the only thing that they can come back to, because you've just seen, we've demonstrated it. We've used his words, and we've demonstrated that a national government is going to mandate things over councils as well, right? And it's going to cost something. Really, so okay, so they've sliced it 3 different ways, but the only difference is none of them Maoris are going to be involved. That's really the only difference. A few different here and there, and this one on top of that one is shut. But really, the big difference is we've got rid of the co-governance, and that's really all it comes down to. And that's really all it's fucking ever come down to. And that's really all it's about. There is racial undertones from the right in New Zealand, and that is why many people deem the Three Waters conversation to be full of racist rhetoric.
So let's talk about groups that may have undue influence on things. Ratepayers groups.
Yep.
That's the tweet. That's everything. Like, ratepayers groups over the last 30 years have, well, probably even more than that, have put us in this position. They didn't want to pay for the upgrade of our water infrastructure, and now we have to bite the bullet and do it. And it has become a national issue about racial division because the grey-haired brigade didn't want to pay for it.
Yeah.
They just kicked the can down the road.
We've got one more clip to play, and I think we will. It's only a couple of minutes. What time are we? I don't even know. Sorry, I've been so busy doing other things. Oh, sheesh, we're already over an hour. Yep. Sorry about this, team. But there is one more clip that I want to play, so let's play it. And this is Campbell Barry talking about what's not in National's plan. Let's have a listen.
I think there's always been some really fair concerns around local accountability, responsiveness. A number of us have been trying to work in a positive way with the government to try and address those issues. But what I would say is, again, that the National Party policy does not address the fundamental reason why we need reform, and that is around funding, the affordability for local communities to be able to pay for the tsunami of cost that's coming. It's not just funding the status quo, it's actually the huge costs as our country continues to get older that will need to be funded. And in my view, it sets us up for two futures if we went with that option. A future of failure when it comes to infrastructure because councils simply aren't in the position to fund it, or a future of skyrocketing rates bills or water bills for particularly our provincial and rural communities, which would be the biggest losers, I think, without serious reform and looking at those economies of scale. The government's proposal was looking at 1 million people per entity, and the idea behind that is to ensure that you have that economies of scale to be able to spread some of that cost, to get the investment where it's needed, and to address the funding issue. And that's so paramount in this whole debate.
Now, Jessica asks him a question here, and I think it's okay what she does. She does air quotes a little bit because she unfortunately sort of elevates one of the talking points about a bloated bureaucracy, which the other mayor had mentioned through this conversation. And just have a listen to it. I mean, she does put air quotes up, so it's not her perspective, but it's a bit borderline in my opinion.
What about if the government just extends some of those? So instead of 4, we perhaps see 8 or 10. We would still have the economies of scale, but without that bloated bureaucracy that Dan talked about before. What do you think of that suggestion? Before
we get to the answer, let me just say this. The other mayor suggested like 4, 8 or 6 entities, not 5. I don't think people understand numbers. So bureaucrats are individuals. Bureaucracies are the entities that are coming up around those individuals. If you have now 8 entities rather than 4 or 5, you've got double the number of bureaucrats because you've got more areas and more offices and more fees to pay. Therefore, bureaucracy has increased. So the other mayor suggested smaller entities, more of them. That's more bureaucracy. So to suggest it as a way to get rid of bloated bureaucracy, when you've now got more quote unquote bureaucrats, more officers, more layers to go through to get answers and decisions around, I think that people have lost their mind when it comes to numbers. A bureaucrat is a person that works in a government department. And I'm actually not being fair using that, but let's just say that. So now rather than you've got 5 departments, you've got 8. There are more bureaucrats and there is more bureaucracy. How can having more entities be a smaller bureaucratic situation, Chewy?
Yep, absolutely. I'm so glad to hear that that guy mentioned the fact that these entities have been constructed around having roughly 1 million people each in them.
Easy.
Like that. That's the thing. That's the good idea. That's one of the good ideas. There's so many.
All right, we'll let him answer this, and then we're done in about 30 seconds of the video. He's answering the thing about the bloated bureaucracies.
I would be interested to see where the government does come back on having a relook at their current policy. I mean, I've looked at all of the information on this for over a number of years, and it does show from a financial point of view, the more people you have to fund, the cheaper it's going to be,
of course,
across the board, and the ability for these entities or whatever they look like to be able to borrow. So that will be a trade-off, I suppose. If you may have more regional type entities, but the cost will be higher. But I think Simon Watts speaking earlier, I was a little bit shocked to suggest that for him to suggest that rates won't go up, because under any option, costs are going to go up. It's just a matter of by how much.
There you go, and that's the end of it. That's the end of the conversation. So, Chewy, I've monopolised a lot of this time. Floor is yours, sir. Some chat in there as well. But look, this is the thing. It's just this National Party is now activating their own mandates, activating their own rules. Activating their own costs, and the only difference, not the difference literally, but is there's co-governance gone. So that's really all it is.
First of all, I'm going to throw up a comment from David here because I just love it. Change has effectively been stymied by a tiny and vocal minority of elderly do-nothing numbnuts who would prefer to be well into their graves before any real changes are actually implemented. Yes, that's what we're talking about. Yes, absolutely. None of these things that we're discussing will affect them one iota. But there's a whole bunch of kids that don't get a say, so that's something. Slightly off topic. Yes, Emma, this t-shirt does not say the Brony. It's the Bronx. I can see how you may have thought that though on certain shot framing. I'm not a brony. I'm not a brony.
Can the old man on the other side of the city ask what's a brony?
Weirdly, adult men who like My Little Ponies.
Oh, that means I'm a brony. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh dear, no. Okay, well,
no, I'm just kidding. Obviously,
there's a thing.
I don't like My Little Pony. I love My Little Pony. No.
You can look up something on the internet that involves a My Little Pony in a jar and something.
No, stop. I don't even know where you're going, but stopping. You're stopping now, and I'm not interested.
No. You'll get curious at one point, and that's your mistake. Sunset here says New Zealand is a small country. It needs more centralisation, not less.
Yeah.
Labor did the right thing, re getting rid of the health boards. Yep, absolutely.
But even that, like, that's a debatable point, right? What's not debatable is a fucking political party saying this overreaching government is mandating local bodies to do things, and then they announce their policy and they're mandating local bodies to do things. That's not debatable. That's hypocrisy, and we're not going to stand for it. Sorry, we're not. And if no one else in the media will say it, we will, and all four of you will watch it and see it, and you'll all go, "Yay, they're right," and no one else will know because no one else knows. Someone wants to know how you know about that, Chewy, whatever that stuff was.
Some people know about the jar, and those people are recoiling in horror, and the rest of you are wondering what the jar is, and I hope that you all go and search the My Little Pony jar.
No, I forbid it. Do not do it. I don't know what it is, but it's going to be terrible, and you'll have nightmares. I already know that, and you won't be able to get it out of your
head. Again, another vote for something I keep bringing up. Bring back the Ministry of Works. The mighty Ministry of Works. We get rid of the forestry companies. We get rid of the roading companies. We get rid of the water companies. We just have one massive bureaucracy that monopolizes all of the road cones, all of the high-vis, all of the mobile tea brewing facilities in this country, and just starts building passenger rail to everywhere all at once. That's what we want. I assume that Craig Crabstyle has just discovered the jar. Rob Burney
don't do it.
Says all caps, do not search the jar.
Not going to do it.
I am scared to look.
Yep, don't do it. Have some balls, people. Don't get bullied into it.
I really regret coming into the video at this time. And Emma is claiming responsibility for this whole tangent. Thank you.
Okay.
Emma. This one's on you.
Emma's fault. All right, I think we're done. Hey, thanks for being with us tonight, guys. I don't know what's happening with my camera. I apologize. I think I might have a loose cable. I'm gonna unplug it all back in before I get it, because this is kind of weird now, because I'm here. I'm supposed to be there, and this is the set for my comedy show. It normally looks what do we do? Get rid of that. Come on, go away. It normally looks like this. I'll show you. It normally looks like this, and then I do that one. Come on. Oh, I would have done it a little bit. Oh, because it's over there, isn't it? Duh. I opened it 3 times. That normally comes up here. Get out of it. Oh God, what am I doing?
It's all gone wrong.
It's all gone completely pear-shaped. It looks like this, and then this looks like this, and then this goes like this, and then that goes like that, and that's how it normally looks. Oh, and actually, and I do this as well, and then I put that on as well, like that. Watching around the screen. Oh, I look like that. Now, speaking of, hi. So I can't see Chewy now because he's over there. A new episode drops tomorrow morning with Jeremy Elwood. So the Jeremy Elwood episode drops tomorrow morning. If anyone's interested in hearing the new podcast, Let's Talk Funny. And other than that, I've got Radar next week, and then I've got Michelle Acourt, and then I'm working with the New Zealand International Comedy Festival on some of their hopefully feature artists for the following few weeks. So just a little plug for myself. Chewy, you've got a fridge for sale or something? Got anything you want to plug?
No, I mean, you mentioned international artists and that sort of thing. I'm looking forward to the Fringe Festival coming around. I've just been invited to join the judging panel for the comedy acts in it, which I'm very much looking forward to, because the Fringe has had a rocky road the last couple of years. So if I encourage anybody to do anything, if you have Fringe Festival stuff in your area, jump on it. There's a lot of performers that have had to start up shows, cancel them at short notice, cancel flights, all of that sort of stuff, and try and get back out on the road again. Really vital for those guys.
I was in the Dunedin Fringe Festival offices when first COVID kicked in, because it kicked in like the first lockdown, like 2 weeks before the Fringe Festival, and I was in there with them. Ironically, someone's calling me a pro streamer. Thanks very much there. Hubba huge. We were trying to figure out, I was trying to help them do some live streams, and we were thinking about doing some live streams of the festival rather than having audiences. But in the end, we got completely locked down and shut down. When I say we, I wasn't working for them. I was just sort of consulting to them. And there's a good group actually. I've been talking to the marketing people just today about maybe getting a couple of the comedians to come on this show behind me, maybe even live in the studio, which would be nice. We'll see. All right. Thank you to our patrons. If you want to be involved with what we do, obviously I need a new camera. That's going to be coming sometime soon. Then head to patreon.com/Big Hairy News. And other than that, I think we're done for the night, and we'll be back tomorrow night from 9 p.m. Chewy, anything else we need to know?
No, that's everything. Go to bed.
All right. Don't
think about the jar.
Thank you for being with us tonight. We'll see you tomorrow night. The reason I'm staying on the small image right now, is to say thanks to our patrons, and also to Cheryl, who's our new patron, but also because doing this big rainbow thing in the, what did you call that, test pattern thing? That's all the colors, isn't it? And the thing just, it looks like we don't know what we're doing. It's probably because, Chewy, we don't know what we're doing. Probably.
Pro streamer. I've got a gaming chair. It's all good.
All right, team. We will catch you tomorrow. The sun will come out tomorrow, and for another edition of Big Hairy News. It's been great to be with you tonight. Thank you for all your time. Remember, pass on the news that National's plan is exactly the same, has the same fish hooks that they claim Labor's plan has got, just got rid of co-governance. And that's basically the only difference. Should they get in? Speaking to Simon Wilson, actually, Chew, I don't know if you heard that. I did a Simon Wilson podcast last week from New Zealand Herald. His perspective is National's going to start to taper a bit. And I said to him, if it was today, Simon, if the bet was today, like sitting here today, who's going to win the election? And his money was on Labor. So that's interesting, isn't it?
From the Herald.
Yeah. Well,
the
Simon
New Zealand Herald.
We've had Simon on a few times, you know.
I know. Simon's a good sort, and sometimes I can't reconcile that with the fact that he works for the Herald. But there you go.
We talked about that actually, because I talked about Newstalk ZB with him at the same company, and he's like, well, you know, he likes having his stuff alongside their stuff. Thank you, Kim. There is Byron's book. There is Byron's little autograph inside the book, and it says, thanks for supporting #BHN with Simon's mark in it. Everybody does a super chat this week, and Kim's just done one. Appreciate that, Kim. Goes into the draw for a copy of this week. It'll be today through Thursday, and I guess we had one tonight. So there you go, Kim. At the moment, your odds on. That'll be drawn on Friday. All right, now we are done. Okay, look this way, but look this way, and look this way at the same time. We will catch you tomorrow night from 9 p.m. for another edition of Big Hero News. Stay safe. See you tomorrow. Hooroo.
Nice. See you, folks.